My name's Beverley Sodbinow. I've been with the library since 1999. I owned a small business. I'm a married woman with a son. I've been married for 54 years. I had a small business. I was a beauty therapist for 10 or 15 years. I had my own small business and I had a lot to do with women, as you can imagine. And I really got fairly bored with it. I found I needed a bit more stimulation. My husband retired and I thought it wasn't a great thing for the two of us to be at home together, so off I went to Macquarie Uni to do a degree, and I started an arts degree and I did Australian history, and we had two fabulous women there who were running the women's studies course. Jill Rowe, who's a member of the library, and another wonderful woman who really inspired me. So I thought, this is for me, women's studies. I loved it, absolutely wonderful. So completed my degree, and then I thought, well, what can I do with this? Absolutely nothing. So I went on to New South Wales University, where I did a course in archive management, which I enjoyed very much. A couple of my friends had done it, and they went to work for State Records. One of the ways I became interested in the Jessie Street Library was that when I was doing my women's studies course, I kept looking for books that I couldn't find anywhere. Some of them were in the State Library, some of them were in the National Library, but the Jessie Street National Women's Library kept coming up, and I thought, that's interesting. One of my friends was doing a master's, and she got involved with the collection of posters that we had, and they were being stored at the Marrickville Town Hall, because Jessie Street really didn't have a proper home at that time. So we had our books in various places, our posters were in this terrible place that we were going to buy, but we never had enough money to buy it. So that gave me my interest in the library. I thought it sounded like a wonderful organisation, but eventually the library got some money and they employed 2 archivists, and I was one of those. So that was in 1999. So I was employed as a part-time employee. It was my second job as an archivist. I had a job that I worked at Long Bay Jail. Oh. That was interesting, yes.
Yeah, as an archivist there.
Yes, as an archivist there. So I was only there for a couple of months, and then the Jessie Street job came up. And I was just so delighted to be here and to be involved. And we had just moved into Town Hall House, and we had a lovely space, and we got all our books organised, and of course, you know, we managed to get the archives going, so that was very exciting. The core collection was 500 books from the estate of a feminist called Eva Marie. Later donations came in from various sources of women's organisations, and eventually we got a state government grant, and that's how they managed to employ me. A lot of the books were held in like the Teachers Federation building, and Shirley Jones was one of the women who was very keen to get a women's library going, and she had been doing a women's studies course, and she used to go to North Sydney Library, and she was looking for books on women, and they said to her, well, over there on that bottom shelf, that's where all the W's are. So there was half a shelf of stuff about women.
That's not enough, is it?
No, it's not enough. And the thing is, what we have here in the library is a collection of material about women specifically. If you went to the State Library, there's lots of stuff on women, but it's not collected in one particular point. So that was the whole idea of the library. So there was the struggle to get accommodation, but eventually we were fortunate that we were given some help from the City of Sydney, and we moved into Town Hall House, and we were there for a few years until we came here. The women who were involved in this would not take no for an answer. They were absolutely adamant that we would find a home. They would not give in. They just tried every avenue they could possibly find. I think they might have just found someone with a soft spot, and I'm not sure who it was or how it happened, but there was no way that they were going to give up. So we got that great spot. It was terrific, yes. The most important changes, I think, have been our move towards computerisation. We initially, when we were in Town Hall House, we weren't on the net, but we were on a computerised system, and we had a marvellous woman who had been a librarian at the Newcastle University called Myra Kay, and she came 3 mornings a week by train from Newcastle to the library, and she never went home before 5:30. She was absolutely dedicated. So she got the system up and running. All the books were computerised, but of course things have changed so much in that, 13 years. There have been enormous changes. So we've had a big learning curve to get involved and to get up and to try to make our presence felt. We have a beautiful illumination which is signed by Emmeline Pankhurst, which is a beautiful piece of artwork which was presented to one of the early English feminists, the suffragettes. Her name was Martha Jones, and apparently she had been force-fed, and she was a member of the group of women who were protesting in the early days of feminism in the United Kingdom, fighting for votes for women. It was presented to the library by the son of one of our lovely older members, and it was something that she just had rolled up under her bed, and her son said, "I've brought it in to you because I knew it was something that Mum really valued." And it really touched me because I could see that he understood the value of that item, and that the suffragettes and their battle had gone on through the generations, and he realised that that was a very important thing to his mother, and it was important to him as well. I think she was in England during the suffrage movement. As a young girl, she was in boarding school. So that inflamed her passion for feminism and for equal rights for women. She grew up, she was born in India, and she came back to Australia, and then she was sent to boarding school in England. Her family had a farm on the Clarence River, and she grew up with a lot of Aboriginal children. So apparently she'd learnt the Aboriginal language of the tribe that was near her. So she had a lot to do with Aboriginal. She had personal experience with these people. So she grew to love them. She loved them. She was a great humanitarian. She cared about people.
It seems like she had a deep empathy for marginalised people.
She did.
Yeah.
And I mean, she saw how women were suffering. She saw how educated women had to leave their jobs when they got married. She saw how women weren't being educated when they should have been. She saw, she started this movement to help people who were housewives. She was involved in that sort of thing. She had a great scope of interest.
Yeah. Incredible. And like.
And she was a mother of 4 children. She was married to a very successful barrister.
Yeah.
She was involved with the Street family, which was, part of the society of Sydney.
Yeah.
And I think she was a bit of a shock to them. She felt deeply for the underprivileged. She did a lot of things for children. She was involved in children's hospitals. What else? She was just an amazing person. She was very intelligent. She did very well at university. She was a sportswoman. She was involved in the hockey team. I mean, she was an all-round person who did a lot. Equal pay, glass ceiling, education for women. I think there's, we've come a long way, and we're riding on the shoulders of our sisters who've done so much for us in the past, and we really need to be acknowledging them. I think we should be proud to say we're feminists.
Yeah.
This library is run by a group of women. Most of us are married women with kids. We all call ourselves feminists. I just think, what is wrong with these people that they're not able to say they're a feminist? And life is quite difficult for a lot of women. They're working hard, they've got great jobs, and they've got childcare is a big issue. Yeah. Trying to have a job, put your kids into childcare.
Yeah.
The cost of childcare is enormous. A lot of people just can't afford to do it, and they have to give up their work. Get an education. Be independent. Know how to support yourself. And include your friends. Try and get people to think the same way as you do.
Yeah, galvanise.
Yes,
like
that's
Jessie Street.
really important.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, there's the wonderful feeling of solidarity, being with like-minded women, which is great.
Yeah.
I mean, I've found that marvellous. Met wonderful women here. Some of the women who started the library were just inspirational, and their dedication was fantastic.
Yeah.
If you are a member of the library, you get a newsletter once every few months.
Interesting topics.
Yes, the newsletter's great. We also have our monthly talk that you can come to. We have our wonderful parliamentary lunch, and you get a discount on that. You can use the library anytime you want to. Well, I think that's very good for the library. I think it's very good for us. I think it's really important that we mix with younger people so we know what younger people are wanting from the library, so we can fulfil their needs and work towards those goals. We've got to be offering something that they can't get anywhere else because we're a specialist library.
Yeah.
And we have books here that even the National Library borrows. So we're not getting rid of books all the time, as a lot of libraries are, because they haven't got storage. We've got a lot of older books that are out of print that people can't find anywhere else. And of course our archive collection is particularly interesting. And what this library does is document the lives of ordinary women. You can go to state records, or you can go to the state library, or you can go to the National Library or the National Archives, and you can find records of the lives of famous women. Some of the women in our libraries, in our archives, nobody's ever heard of, but they've done wonderful things and made great achievements.
Yeah.
So we value that greatly,
Yeah, that's
because,
so important.
and then there were all the small organisations defunct women's organisations. We've got those records, and in years to come, people will look at those and they'll be just amazed at what was going on. I love Virginia Woolf, and I love A Room of One's Own. That's a favourite. I do choose to read books written by women in general, because I think it gives the perspective. It gives my perspective.
Yeah.
It gives the way I look at life. And it's a collection that documents the lives of ordinary women who've done extraordinary things. So I'm going to read a little bit about this because I can't remember it quite off the top of my head. The archives document the lives and issues of vital importance to Australian women. Our collection is of Australian documents. They cover attitudes and topics that have been interesting for women for many years. They look at women's church, women's rights, abortion law reform, family planning, contraception, the peace movement, women's refuges, rape crisis centres, healthcare and discrimination against women in the workforce, the fight for equal pay, struggles for government-funded childcare, women in advertising and women in local government. The archives include diaries, letters, journals, the papers of women's organisations and audio recordings. Access to the database can be gained by contacting the library, so we will soon be online. It's very interesting to think that the material that we hold is material that would have just been thrown away, but it documents the lives of women, and it's important to us. So we're very happy to have it. We're happy to guard it, look after it, and to treat it with the respect and the value it holds. The archives hold about 150 archival collections, and the material, as I said before, is to do with Australian women of the 20th century, although there is a little bit of international material included when it's relevant. Most of the material is contemporary, and it documents second wave feminism in Australia. The material dates from the 1970s and 80s to the present day, and a few collections date back to the turn of the 20th century. Included in the archives are the papers of diverse women's groups, the Australian Council for Women, Canberra Women's Archive, the Association of Non-English Speaking Women, King George V Women's Advocacy Group, Parent Centres of Australia, Nursing Mothers Association, the Matrix Guild, Sydney Older Women's Network. So as you can see, it's a broad spectrum. We've got some local government material, the War Widows Guild, Women for Reconciliation, and papers from defunct groups. A lot of the smaller groups that were very active in the 70s when second wave feminism was at its peak just wound down to nothing. So we were fortunate that we got those. The Canberra Women's Archive is the basis of our collection, and it's just another story of how women's material was disregarded. It was held by the university in Canberra, and they had a couple of rooms where they kept their collection, and then they were suddenly told, you don't have any accommodation anymore. They had this terrific collection of material from small women's organisations, and they just had to find a home for it. So after a lot of negotiations, we were fortunate that we received it, and it's been of great interest. You know, in 100 years' time, somebody's going to be thinking, now what was that young woman doing before she started her brilliant career? I mean, I think that sort of thing is really, like, I keep birthday cards and I keep all sorts of things because, you know, I'm a keeper.
Yeah.
But you know, we now live in this age, minimalist age, where you don't keep things. And no clutter. Got to get rid of your clutter. You
I
can't
think
keep...
all the clutter's probably online now.
Possibly.
Lots of clutter
So what we hold in the library is, you know, there's things that people have no value for. We were given a collection of material. It came from the city of Sydney. It was from a woman who had been a cookery teacher at TAFE. Now it went back to, I think, 1906, and it was her recipe books and the structure of her classes and how she'd done these things. You know, no big organisation wanted to keep that. So they, you know, would they throw it out? What would they do with it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's somebody's life. It documents somebody's life that she may not have been an important, famous person, but it gives a slice of a woman's life. One of our most interesting collections is a huge collection. It's called the Helen Leonard Collection. And Helen Leonard was a political activist, a feminist, a nurse and a photographer. And she was born in 1945 and she died suddenly in 2001. Now, her collection included 13,000 photographs documenting 30 years of the women's movement. Now, a lot of this material isn't of much value because the people in the photographs aren't named, they're not dated, it's very non-specific. But her other material was important. Because she died suddenly, her kids had to go and pack up her life, all her documents, everything that she'd collected over the years. She'd been involved with the Nursing Mothers Association for many years, and she had a fantastic collection of all her work that she'd done as an activist, but it was in the most terrible, haphazard arrangement.
Yeah.
And her kids arrived with about 45 boxes of her papers that were not in any particular storage method. They were just unbelievably messy, and we've been working on those for years and years.
I'm sure.
So there's a lot of work involved in that. We've got people together, and we've had people in to look at them, and friends and people who are involved in various organisations. So the ones that we could document, we have. We've got photos of her when she was a little girl. We've got photos of her at Hornsby High School. And the ones that we can't document remain a mystery, and we may not even keep them because storage always is a problem.
Oh, absolutely. But I love that you never know what you might unearth in
Exactly,
this stuff.
exactly. And what archives are used for isn't always the purpose they were made for.
Yeah.
So people will use them at different times. A lot of our smaller organisations that are defunct ran out of funding. So I've kept their return checks and their bank statements that say they've got no money, all of those.
You are a keeper.
Because I want people to know how difficult it was. There was no funding for these things. Women were struggling to do this. The collection is wide and varied, interesting and exciting in many ways. And then there's the mundane and the boring. But that's women's lives.
Yeah.
It's a portrayal of how women lived their life and what was important to women.
Yeah.
When you look at Helen Leonard's material, at one stage she's a mad, passionate activist, and then she was head of the Nursing Mothers Association. So just the changes in women's lives. think we have a responsibility to the women who went before us to document their lives so that people understand the difficulties that have been encountered, that younger women realise that, 50 or 60 years ago, if you're a teacher, you had to resign from your job. Women didn't receive equal pay. There wasn't child endowment. There wasn't child care. There wasn't money for childcare. I think it's important that we document those things, that people will know this is how it was. And I think the responsibility we have is to keep that safe so that people can see and people can learn and not just take it all for granted.